Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This is going to be the first video in a series on upgrading my garage storage, and this week on the Garage Workshop we're going to be making a mobile wooden storage unit from recycled wood. Roll the intro. So the first thing I did was get the casters that are going to be on the bottom of the storage unit, and I just wanted to check the measurements. I've had these casters before. I've used them on a couple of projects. They're fantastic casters, but I just wanted to make absolutely sure I had the correct height for them, because this unit has got to fit storage on the top of it and fit in the ceiling. So the first thing I did was get the casters out, got the tape measure out, and just measured. They were exactly as they should be, which is 70. I'll leave a link in the description to the casters that I use for Amazon. Really, really high quality, really sturdy casters. I think they're about £14 something. After I did that, I just went over and double checked the height of the current unit. And obviously I measured this from the bottom of the shelf and from the bottom of the floor to get the correct size. The next thing to do was to raid my wood pile, which I've stored at the top. I've said in lots of videos, you're probably sick of hearing me say it, but the price of new wood at the moment is insane. And each of the CLS stud timber planks that you can see are over £5 each now, which is just ridiculous. But luckily I've saved all these from other projects that I've had and just stored them all up there, and they came in useful here. So I had the slightly wider wood, which I'm going to use on the sides, the wider CLS timber, and then the smaller ones are going to be cut up to use for the shelves. I was incredibly lucky here. I had just enough of the large pieces and pretty much enough of the small pieces, but I did have to use some of my other little offcuts, recycled offcuts. So here I am just checking that I've got the correct amount of wood and putting it back before I started the process of trimming down the longer pieces that I need. I think they worked out to be 1 metre 70 in the end, 170 centimetres. I was really careful how I cut these. You can see me there. You can't see, I didn't set up a stop block. I did it on actual lined measures with a mechanical pencil, very thin line, which is me just making sure I've got the edge, the outside of the blade touching the inside of the wood. When I did that, I brought them back to the bench, just gave the ends a quick tidy up. To be fair, there's not much cut out with my saw, so I just gave them a little once over with the sandpaper, and then I made sure that I got them all lined up so I could start with the next stage, which was putting on the stop block. These are really easy to construct, these units, and I have made one before, one of my first projects as a woodworker actually, which is over in the other corner of the garage. You might have seen it in some of my other videos, but I just got a piece of wood which was 80mm, 8 centimetres long, made 4 of them, and I attached them to the bottom. They sort of looked a bit like stilts, is probably the easiest way to describe it. When I put the 4 together though, I could see that they weren't 100% level, so I just took them over to the table saw and slid one of the edges over. Then I marked them up and started to make the holes. Apologies for the camera angles here. It's a fantastic view of my elbow though, but I wanted to get the blocks in, get them all cut, get all the holes cut, so that I could fix them in. And it's really important that this one is strong, because this is the bottom shelf and it's going to carry a lot of the weight, which is why I put 4 screws in it. I'm still using those screws that are left over from the chicken coop, that box of never-ending screws. So I got them all exactly as I wanted them, laid them all down, put them all screwed in side by side, and I was actually really pleased when I put the 4 of them together that they were pretty much dead on, because I'm going to make this whole shelving unit without really using a flat space. Next thing was just to check the measurements of the depth and the length. I'm actually going to make another one of these units after this, which won't be a video because obviously you've seen one. Then I went through the process of cutting the lengths I need for the shelves. This is the thinner CLS timber, and these are going to form the lengths of the shelves. So when I'd done that, I offered them up just to make sure I got the right size. I used a few offcuts of wood to see which one fitted in the middle. Eventually, I had a winner. I was happy with how that looked. And then I set up a stop block on my miter saw to make sure they're all the right size. I'm using a stop block a lot more than I ever thought I would, and I actually did something more unusual for me in this video. I'll show you in a minute. But there was a long process then of cutting wood, and as I got to the end, I realised I ran out of what I didn't quite have enough. So you can see there's a couple of longer pieces there and a couple of thinner pieces, but they're only going to be shelf edges, so it doesn't matter. Wouldn't be a garage workshop video without a ridiculous amount of pocket holes. And for those of you that like pocket holes, here they are. There were hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them. It felt like it took forever, but obviously for you in YouTube land, very quick. So with that done, I set up a little right angle on this little temporary bench I made with some of the offcuts I got from the kitchen, and I just started basically whacking the shelves together. Now, I know you can see they're a little bit uneven, and to try and get around this, I just kept rotating the wood every time. They are a little bit sort of cockeyed, I suppose, is probably the best way to say. But the good thing is, by the time they've got all of the central supporting struts in them, and they've got the wood on the top, and then they're screwed into the shelves, I don't think it will make much difference. And as it turned out, it didn't. It might seem a bit overkill, but I did put 2 struts in the centre of each of these shelves. And you might think, well, why put 2, put 1 in? But I knew this shelf was where I was going to store all of my paint and all of my heavier items. And I wanted the load to be spread evenly amongst the shelves. And if I just had 1 in the middle, there's potential for bowing. And I just didn't like the thought of that. So I put 2 in each one of the shelving units. And with that done, and all of those braces screwed in, I then went on and did exactly the same for the others. I didn't show you that because it's the same process. I then started with the scraps of OSB to cut out to make the top of the shelves. This was 12mm OSB, I think. Really good stuff. Out came my Parkside track saw, which I'm completely fallen in love with. I think this is fab. I've mentioned it loads of times. I'll shut up. But if you're in the market for one, £79, can't get any better than that in my opinion. So cut out the shelf, put it on the top. As you can see, it looks a bit wibbly wobbly that side, but it was actually fine on the top, and all the sort of extra bits of wood were all on the bottom where it doesn't matter, of course. I then did some pilot holes and drilled in a selection of screws, all quite long screws, I have to say. And again, you can see me there coming out of my collection of spare screws from the chicken coop. Now here, had a little bit of a problem. I put one all the way in and it went through the OSB. I tried to get it out, but I couldn't. So I just drilled a hole and put one next to it. It was on the back of the finished unit, so it didn't make any difference really. So when I did that, I repeated the process for the other shelves, and then I went outside. It was a lovely day, and I started to lay out how the shelves would look. Now, you'll see some chickens running around in this picture, by the way. So basically, when I got that first one in, I then cut a piece of offcut, which was exactly the distance apart I wanted the shelves. And then I went back in to cut these little blocks of wood, which were going to be the next blocks. And this is the first time I've used a stop block like this. As you can see, I've got because I can't cut wood too short, I put the stop block in and I just put the wood up against it. More holes this time. Everything had a pilot hole in it. Now you can't see it, but they didn't go all the way through these pilot holes, but they went pretty far. There's my spacer, and then I offered it up. Really, really simple woodworking this. Just put the spacer in, butt the block up against it, drill and screw it through, offer up the shelf, make sure it's okay, then mark it, do the same again. So this process went on all the way through until I had all of the sort of shelf supports, I think is the best way to describe it, in exactly the right place. But of course, this is only half the picture. So when I'd got them all, I transferred the lines to the bottom because obviously I've got two other units, parts of the unit that haven't had anything done. So I transferred it to the bottom, leveled it off, and then I carried those lines across, and that gave me the opportunity to make sure that all of the shelf supports were in exactly the same place. So I put the screw holes in, which were going to be on the outside of the finished storage unit, got them all right, leveled it all up, and then I was able to put the support blocks on the inside. You can also see in the gym there my tortoise Sheldon running around. I got very excited because you can see the chickens. So got them all there, got it all laid out, then I offered up the shelves one at a time, and I was able to start screwing them in. And I think you're beginning to see how the construction of this is. It's so basic, this. It is basic, but it works really, really well, and it's incredibly strong. So I offered up the second shelf, all the time keeping it level. Remember, I did all of this without a spirit level. I had no idea how level this was going to be at the end, but fingers crossed it was going to turn out all right. And actually, it was immaculately level. Every shelf, every edge completely upright. So I offered up the third shelf, and here I had a little bit of a divergence. I don't know if the shelf was slightly bigger or slightly smaller, but here it just started to pull apart. So when I put the top shelf in, I got it flush to the sort of left-hand side, and you can see there, I think it's quite clear, you can see there's a gap. It's out on the right-hand side by about 10 mils. So I had to do a little bit of stretching to get that across. I then flipped the unit over, and I started with what would be the top brace, and exactly the same as I did with the other brace. Just attached it on, got it as close as I could get it, and then screwed it on. Now here was where I had more problem. I don't know whether it was just the shelves or if there's a bow in the wood, but when I got those two bottom bits in, there were quite a lot of things that were slightly out. So I just gradually pulled them together, used some clamps, got that third set in, and then for this I had to pull it in, so I had to go and get one of my bigger clamps. I've got a video on clamps. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'll put a link in the top corner, but well worth a look if you've not seen my video on clamps, which was my last video prior to this one. When I'd got all of the screws in and it was nice and straight and stiff and rigid, I then attached the casters, 4 drill holes. I've got these sort of hex bolts, which are sort of self-tapping, and I drilled them in, and I put them in, bolted them in as quickly as I could whilst trying to maintain everything being exactly the right place, which, trust me, wasn't easy. And then for the first time since the project started, I tried to pick it up and obviously realised I couldn't pick it up that way. So I lifted it up from the middle and flipped it onto its feet, and voila, it looked amazing, perfectly sturdy. So the last thing, of course, was just the finish, and that was just a spray lacquer. And so that's it. That's this week's project. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry, I know I was talking a lot all the way through that, but I'm trying to make my videos a little bit shorter. Some of them are getting really big. So thank you very much for joining me on this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Lots more videos coming up in this series as I make 2 or 3 different things for the garage, just to help the workshop and get the organisation a little bit better. And when I've managed to do all of that, I'm going to do a workshop tour, because I'm a very amateur woodworker, and there's quite a few things I think that other people could pick up on. So thank you very, very much. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. If it's not your first time, if you're already subscribed, please leave a comment. And if you haven't hit the notification bell, please do so. Have a fantastic week, and I'll catch you next week. Goodbye, fellow woodworkers.